Evening, Gabbie.
And welcome all to a chapter of my life with writer Mr. John Brindley. How's things, John?
That's very, very formal entry there. Thank you very much for that. Things are fine, actually.
Well, I like to give formal entrances to all of my guests, and some of my guests I know better than other guests that I have, but we're all friends, and we're all talking about books that we've written, well, what you guys have written. We just promote them on the Curran View, our regular podcast with the Idol of Hillsborough, Mr. Terry Curran. And you wrote a book with Terry, Regrets of a Football Maverick. You've written another one with Terry, Gimme The Ball. And you've also written one with Gary Mills, Young Millsy. But before we get into your books, let's have a bit of your background and how did you become a writer in the first place?
Okay, yeah. Well, my career has been as a journalist almost all the way through, and certainly connected with writing all the way through. So I worked as a journalist primarily for a local newspaper in Loughborough, fairly near where I come from. I'm a Nottinghamshire person by birth, but having lived in Leicestershire most of my life. And then what happened was to sort of get the entry into books was that 2003-4 probably, a gentleman walked into our offices and said, "Is there anybody here who might like to write my book?" And he turned out to be a doorman. He turned out to be a gentleman at that stage, I think in his early 60s, and he had an interesting story. And I spoke to him and decided that I would like to do that. And we produced an interesting book for this man who was an extraordinary character, because he was still doing this job that just requires a great deal of bravery and fortitude in his 60s, and doing it with a great amount of gusto, I have to say. So that sort of started me off, and although I've sort of like done other jobs in between, I've come back to writing full time in the last year, partly as a result of the lockdown.
So many things or many people have benefited from the lockdown. Many businesses have grown, and it is a great time for somebody like yourself that writes, because you have a little bit more spare time, and you've got that blank page, haven't you, to just go and do whatever you want to do when you want to do it, because there wasn't many other places that we could go out to. Certainly all the pubs were closed.
Yeah, very true. And actually, go back to the latest Terry book. In many ways, that everything starts out, doesn't it, from different points of view. And when Terry sort of indicated that he might be interested in writing another book, as I say, I wrote the Regrets of a Football Maverick with him sort of 7 or 8 years ago. It was really like this for me anyway. This is a lockdown project.
Yeah.
This is something that gets me out of the house, which is something to do, something to aim for. And it was just after that really that I decided that actually I wanted to sort of do this a bit more and to make it my full-time work. So to use a football phrase, that sort of kicked it off.
Yeah.
Working with Terry again was the first one, and in the last year I've been sort of busy writing altogether 3 books. One on Terry, one, as you say, on Gary Mills, who another sort of famous former Nottingham Forest man, and also a professional boxer called Steve Ward, who's got a remarkable story. So I've had like a very interesting year. Not a year that's produced like instant revenue, because work needed to be done on all 3 books before that could possibly happen. But certainly a time which has had a lot of fulfilment in it, and which I'm really pleased about.
How did you come across Terry Curran in the first place to write Regrets of a football maverick, because that was published by Vertical Editions, which is a local Sheffield organisation, publishing company.
Right.
This latest project and group of books with Terry and Gary has been published by Morgan Lawrence Publishing. Have they published the boxing book as well, or have you gone and had to go to a different publisher, because these are both football books? And by the looks of it, Morgan Lawrence specialise in football books and mainly Leicester and Nottingham Forest.
I think that's possibly a little bit misleading, because Morgan Lawrence has only been in existence for a relatively short time. So the first books have been on the lines that you've just been stating.
Yes.
And reflect perhaps the interests and experience of the people concerned, which sort of tends to point towards football and, the two clubs that you've just mentioned. But it certainly isn't sort of going to be confined to that in future. The business, which I'm sort of like, if you like, freelance part of, is looking to write books on, anything that really is of marketable value. Yeah. So other sports, you know as well as I do that obviously football is the main sport in terms of books, but by no means the only one. And also they look on the lookout for celebrities and people with a story. So anything that is would sell and be of value, we're interested in doing. Now, the first question you asked there was about the boxing book, and actually that is being done by Vertical Editions.
Right. Okay.
So I had you asked also about Terry and how that came about, and it's actually an interesting story, because if you first go back to where I heard of Terry Curran, this is a strange thing for me to have such a precise memory, but it is actually true. I was on a family holiday in Wales as a youngster, basically, and being a sort of football mad person, I'm never far away from hearing about football news. And the radio was on, and I heard that Nottingham Forest had signed this player called Terry Curran from Doncaster Rovers.
Yeah.
And perhaps being a little bit more interested in football than I should have been, I was very concerned that we need to get back in home to see this guy play and to see Forest play on Saturday, right? And fortunately, my father was perhaps just as interested in football as I am, and we did that. And I watched the game. He played for Forest against Notts County at the City Ground. And although it wasn't a good day for us from the point of view that actually Forest lost the game, Terry was outstanding. He was the best player on the pitch, and he became my sort of favourite player during a spell that people don't sort of remember quite so well. People remember obviously the time when Forest was so successful and won the First Division and 2 European Cups and things like that. They perhaps don't remember quite the period just before that, when they were trying to sort of stabilise and then get out of the Second Division. And Terry was with Forest during that time, and it was really a shining light. And at one stage, as he sort of said in the books, he was the most exciting player at Nottingham Forest. Yeah. He was the player that had people on their feet, and John Robertson was more at that stage like a part-time. No, he was more a sort of peripheral figure, and not the sort of dominant one that we all remember. So then going further, sort of into time and obviously beyond Terry's career, I'd written a book on the chairman of Doncaster Rovers, John Ryan, which was the first sort of sports book that I'd written. And I was working for the Football League paper, and I was working at a game at Chesterfield at the old Saltergate ground, which is one of the quirkiest football grounds and much missed in some respects. And at half time, we went into this small room for cake and sandwiches, which is really quite one of the best things about going to Chesterfield at the time. And I heard these journalists talking about Terry Curran, and they said that he's applied to become manager of Sheffield Wednesday. It's unbelievable. What on earth is he doing? And I took a completely different tack on it. I thought, well, that's really interesting. And you know what? I'd really like to speak to him, about other things. And I contacted someone I thought would know him, and it went from there. And it's fair to say that his first reaction wasn't, yes, let's do it. He sort of took a little bit of persuading, but eventually we got there.
And what a fantastic guy, I got to say, what a fantastic guy Terry Curran is. I mean, the way I come across Terry was around about the time that Regrets for Football Maverick had come out, and through Facebooks and social media, I'd noticed this fella, Terry Curran, and I remember watching as a kid Star Soccer, and Hugh Johns identifying this rebellious type of figure, Terry Curran. And it's a name that always stuck with me because he was different to other football players. He had that wavy black hair and that little kind of tosh, and he played with a swagger, and he was a winger, and he kicked people, and he was horrible, for the defenders, because he'd give back just as what he was given. So as a young, impressionable kid watching Star Soccer, and you're right, Forest wasn't that team that they become. I think, did they have a Barry Butlin up front for them?
I think actually Barry Butlin, Forest won their first couple of games under Brian Clough, one in the FA Cup famously at Spurs. Barry Butlin, I believe, scored the winner in the first league game that they played under Clough. But as you know, Barry Butlin was pretty much a journeyman striker, wasn't he?
I don't remember much of him, John. I just remember Curran that you, Johns, was saying, and I'm sure there was a Barry, because I thought as a kid, Butlin's holiday camp, and you're watching Forest, and then I think Cloughie probably was the manager at that time. Well, he would have been because he signed Terry. So of Brian Clough as a kid because of what he'd done at Derby, and then he had that situation at Brighton. So, he was in our front room. And then Forest it was Birmingham City, Aston Villa and West Bromwich Albion, of course, in the West Midlands. But Star Soccer always took games from the East Midlands as well. And obviously Derby County. Wasn't it? ATV. Yeah. Derby County and Nottingham Forest and Leicester City were the three premier sides from the east side of the county. So, again, Terry was very prominent for me growing up as well.
Yeah, and there was this incredible spell where, and you know what, despite all the glories they had sort of in the subsequent years, this spell remains sort of like in my memory because it was unique. It was 4 goals against Hereford, followed by 5 goals against Carlisle United, then 6 goals against Sheffield United. And if you ever want to see exciting football, go onto YouTube and look up Nottingham Forest 6, Sheffield United 1, and look at Terry's contribution to that game, which was absolutely outstanding. He scores 1 goal, and I think he sets up sort of 2 or 3. Yeah. And you really get a sense of what the guy was about. And we went down to the next game, and you know what football fans are like. There's a bit of sort of banter and a bit of sort of humour around, and you're thinking, we've won 7. We've had 4, 5, and 6. We're gonna beat Burnley 7, right? And this was a very, very sad occasion in many respects because Forest went 2-0 up inside the first sort of quarter of an hour, and Terry scored one of the goals, and then he was injured in like an accidental collision, basically. Involving Paul Fletcher and a misplaced pass from John McGovern. All very innocent sort of stuff. But, of course, we had no idea, how badly injured he actually was. You saw him taken off and you worried about him. But we didn't really realise that was going to have a massive effect on his career and, his time with Nottingham Forest. Brian Clough very famously told John Lawson, who was the prominent sort of reporter at the time at Nottingham, at the Nottingham Post, that promotion has just limped out of the door. Yeah. That was when Terry Curran had, walked out, had basically come out of the City ground on crutches. He was out for sort of several months and never really actually regained his spot in the Forest side. There's a big story about that, and you can read about that in Gimme The Ball. But, it's fair to say that Nottingham Forest were a tremendous side, and, as a Forest supporter myself, I appreciate all that. But there are certain times when you look back on it in retrospect and you think, who were the people that really excited you? John Robertson really excited me as a footballer. Trevor Francis at times excited me as a footballer. Having Peter Shilton in goal was like a masterclass in front of your eyes, really. But nobody, in my view, sort of has got people off their feet as much at Nottingham Forest as Terry and Duncan McKenzie.
Yeah.
Remember Duncan sort of like just prior to Brian Clough becoming manager, and in fact he became one of Brian's signings at Leeds, didn't he?
He did, yeah. And he used to jump over minis before the game.
Yeah, he was such a, Duncan McKenzie, playing in a pretty poor Nottingham side, was just thrilling. I remember, again, like a memory of a game that was absolutely nothing game. It was a county cup game at City Ground. These days they don't even play the county cup anymore. But it was a Forest versus Notts County. No one's really bothered who wins that game, to be honest with you. I'm sure the players aren't sort of like 100% into it either. But Duncan McKenzie was like doing things, showing off skills that you think, wow, pushing the ball through somebody's legs, waiting for them to catch up with him, then doing it again. Yeah. And, when you think about it, there's so much that you see in football that sort of you pretty much forget almost instantly. You don't sort of like spend a lot of time sort of eulogising over grinding out a 1-0 win and things like that. But you remember sort of like outstanding pieces of skill. And Duncan and Terry, and the other person I'm going to mention here, which I didn't unfortunately get the chance to see, but I know was of the same ilk, was Ian Moore.
Yeah, story.
Who was also a great former Forest player.
Yeah. And
those were the players in my mind that lifted, got people off their seats. And it is extremely rare.
I think you're absolutely right. When you're looking at Forest, when you're looking at any team, it's those maverick type of players, those exciting type of players, those players that done things that others wouldn't even think about doing, but did it with a style and a swagger. And you're right, they got bums off seats, and of course in those days it was terraces, but they got us excited. They got us, give him the ball, and again, hence the title with Terry Curran, because that's what Terry used to say in every dressing room: give me the ball, just give me the ball. And that's absolute bravery in players, because it's not always that every player wants that ball, but those type of players, your Duncan McKenzies, your Ian Story-Moores, your Terry Currans, them are the brave players. Those are the players that want that ball and excite you.
Well, the thing about Brian Clough was he was willing to accept people making mistakes, because people do make mistakes.
Yeah.
No one ever makes mistakes on purpose. It's just one of those things. But what he wasn't willing to forgive was anybody who wasn't prepared to take responsibility.
Yeah.
So in other words, somebody who would hide, somebody who didn't want the ball, somebody who sort of would make excuses and keep out of it when the going went tough. Well, Terry was the opposite. And, as a winger, sometimes wingers aren't the bravest, weren't known as the bravest players, but he was.
Absolutely.
He was a brave player. And I think, you mentioned the word maverick then, and it is correct. And I think that Brian Clough recognised something in Terry Curran, because obviously, you know, we don't need to prove this, do we? Brian Clough was a maverick.
Oh, absolutely. He was the biggest maverick of the lot, Clough.
Yeah. But, you know, the word maverick can be misleading in some respects because, to be honest with you, it isn't that people like Terry and people like Brian Clough and people like Alan Hudson are like off the wall. It's just the fact that part of them does things differently and sees things in a different way. And it doesn't mean that they're irresponsible. It doesn't mean that they're not effective. So, for example, you know, Terry was not a maverick in the sense that he trained very hard. He didn't sort of, you know, make excuses and not go training or train half-heartedly. He didn't go out on a pitch and leave anything out there. He put in 100%. I'm convinced he put in 100% for every club he played for. Yeah. So those traits are exactly the mainstream traits, if you like. What he had, and what, you know, Alan Hudson had, and Charlie George and Stan Bowles and people like that, was just outstanding ability, and maybe an ability also to see things that other people didn't see.
Absolutely.
And so I think, you know, do you see what I mean? I think the word maverick can be sort of used almost as a deprecating comment to put somebody down, and it's not right. It's really someone different. That's what he was. And is.
Yeah, my understanding of the word maverick is genius. And
yes,
maverick,
that's a good, yeah.
A maverick is a player, you're absolutely spot on, that sees things differently, that does things differently, that coaches and managers can't really control, and the good ones don't want to control them because they just say, go out and play, and when you come off the pitch, we'll all smile together. And those are the players that put smiles on the faces, put fans into football grounds, and the Mavericks are the entertainers, and they are the reason why me and others love the game of football, fell in love with it, and watch it to this day for a player to get the ball and do something special. And something special is what these books are. And Regrets of a Football Maverick, I have to say, what an absolutely fantastically written book. And
Thank you.
When you read it from cover to cover, you instantly fall in love with the character, that character being Terry Curran, our friend, and what a fantastic person he is. And the time that TC gives to others is second to none. And I have to say the same with Alan Hudson. Both of those players, totally different class, totally great players. And I love reading about them. And Gimme the Ball, I have got it signed by TC, and I look forward to reading that from cover to cover. Let's talk about the Gary Mills book now. How did you get involved with Gary? Was it when he was doing his gardening, or was that some other fella?
No, I tell you how that happened. I mean, I'd come across Gary occasionally through sort of doing some work. I still do some freelance work for a newspaper called the Non-League Paper.
Right. Okay, I know it.
Yeah. And Gary, throughout most of his sort of managerial career, which is still happening, which is still going now, has been a manager in non-league football. Not because he sort of intended that to happen, it's just the way it's happened. So I remember sort of interviewing him when he was like Tamworth manager, for example, and probably another, say, one or two times. I'm not 100% certain, but each time I spoke to him, I got this impression of a really, really polite and honourable type of guy, and I'm very impressed with him. And then what happened was, and this was very much on the sort of cusp of the lockdown. Obviously, we didn't know that at the time, but I was at an event at Trent Bridge. It should have been at the City Ground, but the City Ground was busy, and there was this. It was an excellent event, actually. It was a charity event raising money for a form of Alzheimer's. And so there's a lot of, and we're talking about a local character who was connected with Nottingham Forest called John Hazeldine.
Okay.
And there was a lot of former Forest players there, including Gary. And myself and my wife were on the same table as him. And at one point during the evening, he got up and just sort of had a quick chat with him. And again, we thought, well, what a lovely guy this is. So polite, so nice, so naturally sort of friendly. And I thought to myself, I wonder if he has written a book. And I consulted a friend of mine called Mike West. And Mike West told me, he's in the process of writing one now. So I thought, well, so that was it, like that idea was bit in the dust, nothing lost, but he's obviously doing something different. And then sort of probably if you sort of go on, say another sort of 5 or 6 months, I got a phone call out of the blue from Mike saying, "Oh, I've got a book for you." "Oh, what's that then?" And he says, "Gary Mills." I said, I thought you said that Gary was already working with someone." He said, "Yeah, it's sort of fallen through, and he needs to. He was looking for someone else to work with. He's looking for a writer and a Forest supporter." Well, I said, "Well, I qualify on those two." And I got in touch with Gary, and it was one of those things that, again, was like really very smooth. It was it just happened very easily. And you know what, Gary and Terry are not similar to people in some respects, but they have similar traits in their professionalism. And Gary is the type of guy who is a real role model for all footballers, really. He is the ultimate professional, and the type of guy who he is totally unaffected by what is achieved in the game. So he is the humble family guy that he always was. Brought up with a really sort of close Northamptonshire family, and a really sort of like if he took away all he achieved in football, the type of guy that 99 out of 100 people would just say, "Well, what a great guy," He just got those qualities. He's been a total delight to work with. His story obviously isn't just Nottingham Forest, but it started off with his extraordinary sort of introduction to the Forest first team at the age of 16, winning the European Cup sort of a couple of years later, and playing a big part at Leicester City and other clubs as well. So he's and now in management. A terrific guy.
An absolutely fantastic career. That, as you say, in '78 made his Forest debut.
I was there.
And then went over to Seattle. Played on loan at Derby and played against Forest, and that story's in the book. Went back to Forest. Did he play one period at Forest or two period? That's in the book as well. Notts County, an absolute Leicester legend, and then back to Notts County, and then played through the leagues for various non-league sides, and then went into management. But he's the kind of archetypal boy next door, isn't he? He's that.
He is very much that.
That homegrown, talented kid that grew up loving football because, of course, his dad was a pro, wasn't he?
Yeah, his dad was Rowley was one of Northampton Town's. He played. He's high up the list of appearance holders for Northampton Town. Put it that way. Very, very popular guy apparently, and Gary sort of spent a lot of his childhood watching Northampton Town, and he is. I'd imagine that at school there might have been quite a lot of people who probably didn't take to Gary too much because he was too good.
Yeah, and too
Because
good
he was
looking
like,
as well, wasn't he? He's one of them kids, a good looking lad, great footballer, bloody good at cricket, great at golf, pulls all the birds. You think, I ain't going to invite him to the party.
You've got to find a chink in his armour somewhere, haven't you? But there wasn't one. I mean, he literally, I mean, he's a very, very, very unusual. He thinks this is a record. It may well be a record. He scored a goal at Wembley. He scored a goal at Wembley for England schoolboys. But he's also scored a try at Twickenham.
Wow.
For England schoolboys as well. So he's actually playing for two sets of England schoolboys at the same time. And he was also like the sixth fastest cross-country runner in the country as well.
Wow.
Which is quite ridiculous, isn't it? So basically, Northampton Saints would have liked him to turn professional and play for them. He could have possibly been an athlete, but it wasn't the case quite the same as with Terry. He wasn't beguiled by Brian Clough because Gary, being a few years younger, hadn't got quite the same knowledge of Brian Clough when he first went there. But the club sort of was good to him when they scouted him and made him welcome there. Yeah. And then Brian Clough, sort of influenced, reinforced it. And he fell in love really with the club. And it was like a no-brainer. His decision was, I'm going to play football and I'm going to play for this particular club. And it turned out to be a good decision.
And he made his Forest debut as a reserve player at age 14, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. I mean, he told me that he's like he was training with the youth team, and one day, so apparently there was like two adjoining pitches, and there's a youth on one side and there's a first team on the other, and suddenly Brian Clough comes up to him and says, in his famous drawl, something on the case of, young man, come and train with us. And he goes and trains with this sort of tremendous side, basically, that was beginning to take shape. And apparently got introduced to the realities of professional football by crunching tackles by Larry Lloyd, who didn't like this young man sort of beating him and making him look a bit of a fool. So, yeah, he played Central League football at the age of 14, you're quite right. And at that stage, a lot of people nowadays probably not too familiar with reserve team football in the Central League, but you were talking about a really good league at that time, where, literally the players who didn't make the 12, for the first team were playing, and he played against the top players at, his Central League debut was against Liverpool, which included some well-known players, and then he played against the likes of Colin Bell at Man City at Main Road, and he played at that level. And then he got he was as surprised as anyone when suddenly at the age of 16 he was called to attend the Forest meeting on a Friday afternoon, where Brian Clough used to announce the team to everybody, and found that his name was read out, and he was playing against the team he supported as a boy, Arsenal, at the City Ground, and he did well. It was a successful debut for him.
It's quite incredible, and when you look at it now, sadly, when you're watching the Premier League, a lot of these statistics and different facts and feats are eroded. It didn't happen before 1992, but Gabbie was one of the youngest players to play in the Football League, and at 14 to play against men. And I've always been of this belief that football teams need reserves. When you're playing 16s, 18s, and then 23s, you're playing in the same age group, and there's not an awful lot on it. Yeah. But I remember interviewing Brian Little. He played for Browne, of course, at Leicester, and Brian was telling me how important it was to be a young kid, being in the dressing room of men and playing a game, even though it was a reserve game, where there was something on it. because players didn't get that much money in those days.
Well,
and if you won in the
it's
first
interesting.
team,
As you were talking, I was talking to Terry earlier on about it, and this subject came up, which is, you know, the fact that there's such a massive gulf in the professional game between the first team and what is now like under 21 football.
Absolutely.
And, you know, sort of teams get squads where you've got, I think in both the Premier League and the EFL now, you've got a squad. You have to name a squad of 25, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, to have that 25-man squad, you're obviously then going to have a choice of several more players who might have made that squad but don't. And what happens to these players? You know, in the olden days they would have been playing in the reserve side, but there is no reserve side, and some of them are either not sort of minded to want to play for the under 21s, and there's restrictions on the number of players over the age of 21 who can play in it anyway. And you know, it's reserve team football, or the fact there's no reserve team football, I think is a huge loss in the modern game. I think that football's missed a trick. I think that, you know, in today's environment, where, for instance, like, you know, you could be in a waiting list for 10 years to get a season ticket to Arsenal or Man United or something like that. If there was a reserve team, you'd be getting 15,000 at Old Trafford.
Absolutely, and a great introduction as a kid.
Yeah, and you get sort of people's opportunity to watch games that they don't get. You know, there's so many people nowadays, aren't there, that, you know, they say, oh yeah, I support Man United, or I support Man City. They've never been to watch them. You know, these matches are all sold out. You know, there's so many season ticket holders that you can't get snap up the remaining tickets. Do you see what I mean? It's
Absolutely.
like it's, you know, I just feel as though it's a massive loss.
I do, and there's lots of players, particularly in the Premier League, which is, you know, in old money it was the first division, that don't play against a bloke in a proper game until they're probably 22 or 23. Now, Gary played at the age of 16. He played in Seattle when he was 21 and broke his leg. Now, I watched a podcast with Gary, and he said, excuse me, I've just got to go to my drawer. And he pulled out this metal rod, and I thought it was a weapon. To think that was inserted in a leg. And he was only a kid when he was out there in Seattle as well. So, you know, the experience that he got through growing up in the reserve and going into the first team, going away in America as a kid, and all of that, his football education, you can't buy that. And kids today don't get that education. And I think it is a great grounding.
Yeah, it is a great grounding. I mean, he played, of course, with Huddy at Seattle, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
And he played in the final of the soccer bowl against the New York Cosmos with some very famous players playing for them. Baskins was certainly one of them. And, you know, I mean, you'll have to read. It's another invitation, really, to read the book, how the time in America came about.
Yeah.
I don't believe actually that it was entirely sort of let's get him some more experience. It was one of those things that happened, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
He and Peter Ward went out there. Peter Ward never came back. He sort of like he left Forest and played for Seattle full time. Gary had 2 seasons out there. One very successful, reaching the Soccer Bowl final. The other one just ill-fated. You know, he as you say, he suffered that. It was a bad broken leg too.
It was,
which kept him out for a good year, and made it very hard for him to get back. But you know, he earned the respect of those Forest lads by the way he worked to get himself back, and then went on to play in probably the Forest side that people don't really remember quite so much, because obviously they did, they won the European Cups, and then they never regained that sort of status, which, let's face it, is virtually impossible to attain again. But he's had 2 or 3 very good years at Forest in what we call his second spell. And then after Notts County, which was an interesting move to go to Notts, he went to Leicester, as you said, and I think, he's a Leicester City legend.
Yeah.
And the reason why he's a Leicester City legend, and we're talking about playing in a side that was a second, the equivalent of a championship side rather than a Premier League side, was, again, because of his attitude and because he immediately hit it off with the supporters. The supporters always knew when Gary Mills was playing that they were getting value. They were getting 100%. It just emanated from him, and it's exactly the same sort of feeling that you get when you talk to him. When you're talking to Gary that what he says he means, and if he says he's going to do something, he does it, and he puts 100% into it. He doesn't just half-heartedly try something, and he's exactly the same with the book. He's 100% put effort into it, and he's doing it now. To promote it when it's basically landing on these shores at any time. And it was tremendous for Leicester. And it's under Brian Little. Do you remember the time where they were at Wembley every year?
Yeah, I think they got there 3
eventually
times,
they made it, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they beat Derby in the game?
Yeah. It was a fantastic, because if you think about it, from my point of view as a Forest supporter, that was like I've got no harm really towards either Leicester or Derby, but like they're the sort of traditional rivals, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
And here they were playing at Wembley, and I'm thinking, you know what? I don't really want either to be to go up, but one of them's going to have to win. And Gary, sadly, was not able to play because he got a hamstring injury. But Brian Little pulled off a really superb gesture, which was to invite him to lead Leicester City out that day at Wembley. Now, Gary had played in the previous 2 sort of playoff finals, which were very, even as I say, watching it from what we could call a neutral's point of view, were quite heart-wrenching because they'd lost to Blackburn through let's put it this way, a disputable penalty. And then they'd lost to Swindon the year after, Glenn Hoddle's Swindon, to what wasn't just a disputable penalty, just wasn't a penalty. Yeah. And then they got to play Derby, and there's no guarantees at all that it's going to end well. Derby actually dominated most of that game.
Yeah.
And then there's a great character who I've also had the honour of working with, Steve Walsh, came up with 2 goals for Leicester, and they won the game. And apparently Gary was like in the Radio Leicester commentary box and virtually sort of strangled Leicester's commentator when they scored the winning goal. But that's his passion, And he was a big part of. He became a big part of a day that he didn't play in. But it was a great thing because Leicester caught the sort of attention of a lot of people with their character and their determination to get promotion, which led to, indirectly then to sort of better times, much better times ahead under Martin O'Neill. And then, of course, much further on in the last few years where they've just been incredible, haven't they?
Absolutely. So he's played for Martin, he's played for Brian, he's played for Aaron, and he's played for Brian Clough as well. But there must surely be 1 or 2 stories about Warnock in there because he played for Neil as well, didn't he? So you've got managers there. The stories in this incredible book must be phenomenal, and we don't want to talk about them now because we want people to buy the book. And there's also a story about the UEFA Cup as well, isn't there? while he was at Nottingham Forest. Just for people, the uneducated, and I include myself in this, why is it Nottingham Forest and Notts County?
Why is it Nottingham Forest and Notts County?
Yeah, why don't they? If you say Notts Forest, oh my life, you do not say Notts Forest.
I don't know. I mean, I
okay.
Yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying, and it definitely is Nottingham Forest.
Oh, 100%.
Definitely is Notts County. So I think those were just the names. And so if you mix the two up, and no one ever says Nottingham County, but sort of some broadcasters occasionally say Notts Forest. It does sort of like, oh no, that's not us, you know. But so you say the UEFA Cup.
Yes, there's a story about the UEFA Cup, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't. I mean, this was like one of the most sort of biggest disappointments for many a Forest supporter, including me, was that it was 1983-4 season, I think it was, and so at that particular point, I mean, nowadays, you know, people sort of almost treat like the Europa League a little bit with disdain, as though it's like some type of, you know, totally inferior competition to the Champions League is the be all and end all, such as like the Premier League and the Championship regarded. Well, at that stage, like the UEFA Cup was highly regarded competition for clubs who finished sort of, you know, third or fourth in England. So, you know, so some of the teams that would now qualify for the Champions League would have been in that. So Forest was sort of, you know, probably finished about third the previous season. They got through 2 or 3 rounds, including Celtic, which was a massive occasion. You know, England, Scotland, a game when Scottish football was really still, you know, at a good very good level. So Forest won at Parkhead, and then they go to this semi-final against a very talented Anderlecht side. Yeah. They won. It was two-legged semi-final. Gary played in both games. The first game, Steve Hodge, who, you know, former Forest Aston Villa player,
who's got Maradona,
scored 2 late goals to give Forest a 2-0 lead going to Belgium. And you know, from their triumphs in Europe over the years, a 2-0 victory had been very, very much a popular result for them. They defended every 2-0 that they'd had. And they went to Anderlecht, and to be honest with you, were utterly outplayed, completely outplayed by Anderlecht. However, some of the decisions that were made that night were basically went into folklore. I mean, Gary sort of said he had a good view on one of them, which was a penalty, which I think made it 2-0 to Anderlecht on the night, where Kenny Swain, again a person with Aston Villa links there, he didn't tackle someone on the edge of the box, if you know what I mean. Yeah. He missed him by quite a distance, and the referee gave a penalty, and then so that made it 2. Then they went 3-0 up. So now Forest are on their way out, unless somehow they can score an away goal in the last few minutes. And Gary got a good view of this. Because he took the corner, basically. It was the last minute of the game. So Forest have been totally outplayed. They get a corner. Obviously, all the players, everyone's going to go up for this corner. Gary is known as a very good crosser of the ball, and he puts over a lovely ball, which Paul Hart headed firmly into the net. There was no question at all that it was a goal. And the referee basically disallowed it for a push, which didn't occur. And the referee later was admitted that he had taken a bribe, but there's no coming back from that. I mean, the guy himself has now passed away. The referee. There was talk about compensation, but you know what is the compensation? You know, those Forest lads are honest footballers. It's not like, you know, the situation of today where money is everything. To them, in a sense, and although they wouldn't have rejected the money was also like almost a bit of an insult. You know, they never got it, and what they would have wanted was the medal. You know, was to have gone through to the final, and the final was, funnily enough, won by Spurs. Spurs
It was,
beat Anderlecht in the final. So Gary regards himself as like having missed out on a medal, but there's also another missing medal story there. Do you know about that?
No, I think we'll leave that for the book, because we don't want to tell all these stories, John. We don't want to give too much away. We want
that's
people
true. Yeah,
to
there's another.
buy
I can
book.
assure you, there's another really, really surprising missing medal story in there as well.
There are some fantastic stories of management, of players, of games, of general scenarios in the game of football, which started for Gary in 1978, and he's still going on today because he's the manager of Cabbie, isn't he?
Yeah, and being the type of guy he is, he's very proud of that. He's very, he'd been out of the game for a shortish, well, not a shortish time. I mean, a reasonable length of time. I think after his second job at York City, a club that he has a huge amount of time for and regard for.
Got him promoted, didn't he?
Sorry?
Got him promoted, didn't he, York City?
Yeah, I mean, a big story about York. I mean, there's so many sides, as you know, that are in what we now call the National League. Then it was the Conference, who had dropped out of the Football League, and it must be. I mean, we think sometimes, supporting Midlands clubs that have dropped out of the Premier League. Well, my goodness, how awful it is. But how that doesn't compare with dropping out of the Football League altogether. Yeah. And Gary sort of played a big part, and it was an inspirational part in York actually temporarily regaining their Football League status a few years ago. It went sour afterwards, which is very unfortunate. And he also then sort of was brought back to try to rescue them from another possible disaster when they were at the other end of the National League. But he ended up actually winning 2 FA trophies for York, which is let's face it, it wasn't sort of what York wanted in terms of compared with sort of getting back into the Football League. But those York City fans who watched their team over however many years, those are the times that they actually won something. They won the FA trophy. They went to Wembley. So these are like huge memories, aren't they? Which Gary and his team basically helped to create. So Gary is now, as you're saying, is working with Cabbie, and last season was well, it was what it was. The Premier League and the Football League continued, but as you know, like non-league was just decimated below the National League, and I think his league season consisted of 7 games last year, and so it's almost as though he's starting again this year with Cabbie. And Cabbie's an ambitious club. They've been in the Conference North in the past. They get a good crowd down there. They're enthusiastic supporters, and they're fortunate also to have a guy like him as their manager, because he will treat it. He will be treating Cabbie as if he was managing Liverpool. That's the way he does. He will put everything into it.
Absolutely. And young Millsy, a wonderful title given to him by
his
the
title,
Forest.
by the way.
Yeah, by the Forest, because that's what they used to call him, didn't they? Because he was such a young kid. It was young Millsy. I mean, he's an older Millsy now.
He came out with the title for the book because that's what some of the lads still call him, because to them, they've all grown up together, and he's still young Millsy because he's slightly younger than them. So.
Well, he was born in 1961, wasn't he? On the 11th of November 1961, which makes him 59. And
correct.
Most of those players that he played, in fact, Peter Witt, Forest legend, celebrated his 70th the other day. So,
was it?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So, he was very much young Millsy, and he'll always be young Millsy. And John, it has been a fantastic education for me, sir. and for all our
Well,
listeners.
a pleasure to talk to you as well.
How can people purchase the book finally? Because having listened to all these stories, it's going to be flying off the shelf.
Right. Well, with the Terry book, Gimme The Ball, as you probably know, it's the best route is to go through Terry himself.
Yep.
Terry Curran on Facebook, on Twitter. Message him, and he will get all the details. He will sort of sort it out for you, sign a copy, send it to you, everything. With Gary, you look at the publishing company Morgan Lawrence, and on their website, and you will find the book on there. Or you're welcome also to email myself, which is jbrinders, BRINDERS, @yahoo.co.uk, and I will put you in touch with Gary, and again the same service will be available. He will sign a copy and send it out to you personally. So so these are two exciting projects. Terry's book has been around for 2.5 weeks now, something like that.
Yeah.
Gary's should be arriving any time, and I just hope that people who read them get as much enjoyment out of it as I've got from writing it.
Absolutely. And Morgan Lawrence, their website is .co.uk, and it's Lawrence, LAWRENCE, morganlawrence.co.uk. And with Terry Curran, you can also get Terry's book from our Curran View on Twitter, or on Facebook, The Curran View. And TC is the easiest person to get hold of on his social medias, and that's how Terry is selling his book. John, it's been an absolute pleasure, sir. What's your next project before I let you go? What you working on?
Dear.
What do you want to get your teeth into next?
Well, at the moment, it's a blank sheet of paper again for where we were sort of a year ago, because the two books we've been talking about tonight have been done. The book with the box of Steve Ward is also done from my point of view. We're just waiting for that to be produced. There's been irons in the fire, a couple of irons in the fire for prominent people that have bitten the dust, and with this type of work, the majority of times that you approach someone, it's for one reason or another, it's not going to be possible. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at the moment for new people to work with. Morgan Lawrence, the associates with that, are also looking out for me. So if there's any, I'm looking. Say not footballer, but a sportsman or somebody with a really good story. I'm very, very welcome to get in touch if they want to, sort of get that dream of getting a story actually done, and that very welcome to contact me at jbrinders@yahoo.co.uk and discuss it, because at this particular point, it's a blank sheet and we're starting again, so there's plenty of time.
I think The Curran View sounds like a great running title for a book, based on the podcasts of Terry Curran and Gabbie. We cover a lot of ground, so if you're doing nothing, mate, you can have a look at one or two things. We've got the magic moments, and we do our topics of the week, and our book corners, and our time vaults, and there's lots of pictures that we do behind the lens. So you never know. I think there's been other books written from podcasts, and it could be something going forward that you might want to look at. And My Life, My Music with the Governor Alan Hudson, there's some wonderful stories in there.
What a legend he is, by the way.
Oh, absolutely, and what a great guy. In fact, in the latest Curran View, we do talk about Gary, because Gary is the topic of our latest Time Vault on the Curran View, part 87. We've done 87 now with TC, and I talked to Alan about Gary's time in Seattle, and it's a great
okay.
listen. And there are some wonderful stories, you know, an angle. I was thinking of an angle for books. The treatment room, some of the disastrous treatments that players had in the 70s are incredible. And Uddy spins a few of them, and I'm in fits of laughter. So you never know. A dip in, dip out book. You know, one of those. Kind of in the comedy and the humorous pile rather than the facts and the fiction, mind you. You know, with some of these football players, it's trying to work out what is facts and what is fiction.
Yeah, there's always room for humour in football, isn't there?
I think football is about comedy and humour, and I love to read about those strange but true versions of things that happened, whether it be on the treatment table, whether it be at the training ground, whether it be at the boot room, whether it be at half time, whether it be. And I remember Ian Storymore, just as we're going to finish off now, talking to me. I said, "What was one of the strangest things that you heard in a dressing room, Ian?" He said, "Well, we were playing a game, and Jim Baxter hadn't had the best of games." And the gaffer says, "Jim, that was the worst performance I've ever seen from a professional footballer." And he says, "Well, don't worry, boss. There's plenty more of those where that come from." As he got his towel round him and he went off to the shower.
And, well, that diffused the situation well, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
What a great guy. What a great footballer he was, in fact, Jim Baxter. But
there are just so many football stories.
And you know, Ian Moore. You just said what you said. Well, Ian Moore was a huge example of that.
Yeah.
He had an injury at Man United, which finished his career.
Ligament,
which today they would have sorted it almost, as a matter of course.
Mm.
It ended his career.
And what a player and what a lovely man Ian Storymore is. And I would love to read a book on Ian Storymore. I've done a podcast.
I've asked.
I've done a podcast.
It's obviously something that Ian doesn't want to do, which is absolutely fine. Yeah, I mean, he was a fantastic footballer, and say just as importantly, a great guy that is, instantly liked by everyone. Yeah, it's a shame, but it's maybe just more of a private guy in essence, and books are not for everyone, are they?
No, an absolutely lovely, lovely man. And I just say to every pro that I interview, you know what, you should write a book, because I love listening to all the stories. I love reading the stories, and I think that every pro has a story. And I agree. And I think that all of those stories.
These days there is a real market. There certainly are footballers out there who think, they write themselves off and go, oh, no, nobody'd be interested in that. Well, actually, there's a lot of people that are interested in that.
And that's what comes across from all the pros. Who'd want to read about me? I do. I would. And there's thousands of people that would. And this is the thing, when people say, oh, them footballers, they're so much up their own backsides, etc., etc.
Yeah, a lot of them aren't, are they? A lot of them are not. They're not at all.
I go, do you know what? Do you know what? You're an absolute legend. And they still don't get it. I have met so many football players, and they've said, do you know what? I didn't realise how the fans perceived me. And
there you go.
But you're a legend.
Yeah.
And they don't understand, and they don't get it. And if only the fans realised that, do you know what? All they are normal people that are just bloody good at football, but they're just normal people. So on that note, sir, can I thank you so much for your time? All the best for the future and with these books. And we will reconvene shortly to talk about your latest project.
Thank you, Gabbie.
Watch this space.
Thank you.
Cheers, Mucker. Thanks, John, and thanks for listening. Good night. God bless. Ta-ra a bit. Superb. That's all that done, mate. You'll just cut that from there.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
You're happy, yeah?
Yeah, fantastic,
yeah, thank
mate.
You for that. I enjoyed doing it.
That was really good. That's about an hour of gold there. Chris will just do his little bit of magic, and that'll be up shortly. But yeah,
Right,
you know,
okay.
if I hear of any player,
Yeah.
I'll give them.
Because obviously your sort of like geographical area is just still within my range. You know what I mean?
Mine's
Like
everywhere.
Birmingham.
I mean, although I'm Birmingham,
Yeah,
and I don't do much locally. I do more of my stuff out of town.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
occasionally, very occasionally, will interview a Birmingham City player. Very
yeah,
occasionally.
yeah,
I do a little bit with Villa, and then
yeah,
anybody else that wants to. But I get mine mainly through Facebook and contacts of contacts, and I'll say, oh,
yeah,
Jimmy Greenough, Uddy, get me an interview with Jimmy Greenough, you know, and
yeah,
I'll have a word. And you
yeah.
know, Steve Perryman, I'm going to do my
Oh
next
yeah,
podcast
yeah,
with Steve. You know,
yeah.
there's just so many great football people and players out there. Keith Burchin, that was a great interview I done with
Keith Burgin, you
Keith.
say?
Yeah, Keith Burchin, what a lovely man, and he's
Yeah,
got
yeah,
some great stories as well, Keith. But again,
yeah,
they all have. But I just think the reticence of not wanting to do these things is that they just think, well,
yeah. Because
who'd want to
I
buy it?
think perhaps, yeah, yeah. I
Story
think
more.
nowadays
Fucking hell, what a book that'd be.
I know,
Story
but I did ask him because he was in my Forest Legends book,
Yeah.
and you know I did ask him, and it's just not something for him. It's a shame. Again, partly perhaps because he's like quite a private guy, but partly perhaps because, again, you know, he doesn't quite sort of get how interested people actually still are.
No, because he's just a normal, regular, nice guy.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
just, you
yeah,
know, I mean, it's like when I was interviewing him, I'm thinking, like, fucking hell, I'm interviewing Ian Story more, you know, and it's like,
yeah, yeah,
it's just, they're just so normal,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they just don't get it. But
No.
what a book that would
Because
be.
you see that they weren't hyped as much as they are now, were they?
No, I mean, there's players that couldn't lace their boots, and most of them are in their 70s now. But, you know, that's how
Yeah,
brilliant
yeah,
these players were.
yeah.
And their memories should be recorded. And that's how I got on with TC. So I said, look, you need to have an official account so people
Yeah,
can look at the photographs of you and read the
yeah,
stories and that. You've got a book now.
yeah,
You can put it on there and you can sell it through your official accounts. But again,
yeah,
TC
yeah,
was slow coming
yeah,
forward in the early days because
yeah.
they don't think that the football fan is that interested. But they are.
Well,
And I think there's a
no, yeah,
massive
they are. Yeah,
There's a
yeah,
massive
they
market,
are.
I think, John, for the older ones now as well. You know, and
Yeah,
especially
there is.
the
There is.
Maverick kind of players that we will
Yeah,
always
yeah,
remember and love.
yeah,
But there you go.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Definitely.
Well, thanks for that,
I
mate.
mean,
Sorry, go on.
especially when you support a team like I do, that like you get more enjoyment out of thinking about some of the past people than you do what you're seeing now. A lot more.
Well, I mean, you
So
look at my
like
team,
a couple of
Birmingham
weeks
City.
ago, yeah, on a Friday night we went down to Nottingham and there was like a Stuart Pearce evening.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, that was a hell of a lot more enjoyable than watching Forest play the following day.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
you know, so you know, I mean, the Forest are a bit of an extreme, really, from that point of view, aren't they? Sort of like the success of the past contrasted with the present is like massive.
I think you can always be victims of your own success, and I think all teams do that, and are literally victims of it. And Forest is a prime example.
It'll happen to Leicester in the next few years. There'll come a time when Leicester will be about halfway in the Premier League, and fans will be going, "Oh, the manager should be sacked," and we're no good. We were a humdrum side, and so somebody will say to them, "Hold on a minute. Most years in Leicester City's history, they've not been in the first division."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because they won the league and they've won the FA Cup now. They won't be. Leicester won't be like a top side. They won't be top of the tree in 10 years' time. But they'll be like sort of a good side. But they won't be. They won't match this in 10 years' time.
No, because it's
they won't.
It is what it is, and it go on, cat, get out, fighting. Cats are fighting in the kitchen now, little fuckers they are. Right, I'm going to.
Anyway, it's been really good fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was really enjoyable, mate. But say if I find out any player that wants to, because say as you said, it's not a Nottingham thing. It isn't a Leicester. They're trying to expand, and we're making some decent contacts.
They got the company itself is working at the moment on Malcolm Christie.
Okay, I remember him.
Danny Wilson.
Okay.
Danny Wilson. But that's being done by...
Wilson.
Sorry?
I don't remember Wilson so much.
Oh, Danny Wilson, former Sheffield Wednesday manager.
Oh, Danny Wilson. Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah. So, but it's a guy called Matthew Mann who's working on it.
Oh, well, he shares quite a few things, Matthew does.
Yeah. Well, so you might want to put him on at some point. So he's done He did a general Leicester City one.
Yeah.
He's done Barry Pierpoint's live story, and he's just been working on Julian Joachim, which is finished.
Yeah.
And I think that's virtually produced.
Yeah.
Virtually published, and he's trying to get Jamie Lawrence finished, which is not easy because he's not cooperating much. But he's on with these other two, so he's been extremely busy. He's sort of got Leicester City roots in there, but he's sort of it's just those are sort of the initial contacts. It's not going to be like a sort of a publishing house for all Leicester City and Forest stories in the future.
Yeah, brilliant.
Could be anyone.
But he'll share this, no doubt, Matthew. And I'll just say, if you fancy doing one about Julian, and a general chat about other titles that you've written.
Yeah.
But you know me, mate. I'll help anyone that wants to do a podcast and what have you. Podcast.
You'll like to. You'll get on with him. He's quiet, but he's a nice guy. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Nice guy.
Brilliant. Right, I've put my chicken ding curry on.
Oh, very good idea.
I've run me bath, so I'm going to have that, and I'm going to have a bit of a chill out. I've got to have my food first.
Right, so we'll speak soon.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers, thanks for your time, John. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye. Bye.
If you want years of better sleep, then you have to upgrade your bedding during Boll & Branch's annual summer event. Right now, you can get Boll & Branch's best-selling, naturally cooling sheets with their best offer of the season. Feel the difference night after night of light and breathable sheets made with the highest quality materials. Shop the Boll & Branch annual summer event now for 20% off site-wide. Plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com with code BUTTERY. Limited time only. Exclusions apply. See site for details.